A second. The movement of surgical scissors, the doctor cut the umbilical cord. For a few moments he pondered who exactly had just come into this world, who this person was, but even more significant was who he would become. After all, both Jesus and Hitler had their umbilical cords cut in this world as well, but did anyone then suspect who they would become for the history of humankind? Can one foresee, at the moment one cuts a newborn's umbilical cord, who he will become, a greatest criminal, the heir to God's throne, a shepherd, or a president? 1 second. A second that changes not only the life of humanity, but the entire world, a second to which those incapable of seeing and perceiving will never pay due attention. It is precisely such seconds that give birth to new religions, such as Christianity or Nazism. Each nation and each era has its own. At the very moment when the doctor cuts the newborn's umbilical cord, he, acting as a kind of sacred augur, creates the starting point of the infant's days, which, it must be admitted, from that sacred instant are already numbered. Everyone who is born will die, without the slightest exception. The ouroboros closes. But what will a person do, what will he accomplish between the first and the last moment of his life? Perhaps he will become a figure of global scale, or a figure of merely local importance. Will he dissolve into the masses, or will he become the solvent of the masses? The first fate is no better than the second, for both are doomed to suffer, some because they see too much, others because they are blind. In solitude, this newborn will undoubtedly feel himself to be an individual and a personality. But as soon as he plunges into the chaotic harmony of society, into this motley wash of thoughts and feelings, into this Danaid's barrel of humanity, he will realize, or perhaps not, that he is merely an atom, a cell in the living organism of a multitude of personalities which, when united, paradoxical as it may sound, cease to be personalities at all. Who is this person? An artist, a writer, a sculptor. A genius, a talent, a nobody, a madman. What will society make of him? What will he make of society? Does society feel a need for him? Why did he come into this world, by someone's will, or by a random convergence of circumstances? Is he needed by this world? Did he arrive on time? Not too early. Will he be understood by his contemporaries? Will he be too simple for posterity? Where will the current of history carry him, to the stage, or behind the scenes? What goals will he have in this life and in this world? When, by the standards of this universe, will he become good or bad? Or perhaps he will become one who exists beyond these categories, good and evil. One who will destroy them. Who will he be? A general or a soldier? One who counts people as numbers, or one of those numbers? What will he feel? What thoughts will be born within him? What is his fate? Is all of this decided in the instant when I cut the umbilical cord, or will life shape him, striking the rocks with his tender physical and metaphysical flesh? Or perhaps he will become a tyrant, one who will drown hundreds of thousands of people in blood in order to hold a little longer the reins of ephemeral power in his hands. What if that is precisely why he is called into our world, to fill the gaps of his land's history with new blood, and so on, until the enemies of his state can freely enter where they so fiercely desire? Will he not then, hourly calling himself a hero and a savior of the nation, and daily convincing from all sides the people entrusted to his rule of this very thing, be its greatest traitor? Or perhaps his goal will be the Nobel Prize. Then I pity him, for the Nobel Prize is an award bestowed by people, often politically biased, upon other people who are suitable, convenient. If he exists beyond races and forms, beyond time and space, having united with eternity, all this will only amuse him, just as an adult is amused by children playing in a sandbox and building airy, ephemeral castles. If his goal is the creation of a concept, to become part of eternity, he will understand that the Nobel Prize evaluates people of an era and the works of an era, whereas one who is beyond forms and epochs, one who is eternal, will leave to people the task of judging the human, while his deed will be judged by the Almighty. If he is perhaps a person of creation, he will come to understand in his life that the most difficult part lies not at the beginning of creating a concept, but at its end. At first he will have countless plots, ideas, strength, and motivation, but closer to the end it will become increasingly burdensome. If he is faithful to himself, to his calling, and to the Almighty, he will be saved, not by talent, skill, or inspiration, but by cruel, iron discipline, where there is no room for weakness, laziness, or temptation. And therefore those who claim that his concept is close to completion will not even suspect how far away it truly is. It is not difficult to observe from the outside how, day after day, novellas are created, which undoubtedly creates the impression of ease, but it is far more difficult to comprehend why they are created day after day and what force sets in motion the very mechanism that holds the instrument which pours these or those shades of ink onto the whiteness of parchment. Or perhaps he will become one of those who will tell our world that within each of us there exist several personalities which, at one moment or another, under one circumstance or another, manifest themselves in one way or another. One of these personalities is fundamental, basic, the one to which we always return in difficult moments and upon which we unconsciously construct all the others. These are our native Penates, our fortress, to which we will always return when it is hard, our refuge that grants us confidence in the future, in tomorrow. However, be that as it may, one thing I know for certain, like all before him and all after him, he will claim that he lived and existed at the junction of eras, times, and centuries, certainly in metaphysical aspects, and that precisely his time was the most burdensome, significant, and exceptional for the history of humankind, like a climax, the highest flare of a fire of life, when sparks scatter in all directions with the same arrogance with which true patriots abandon their native lands. When war comes to their homes, claiming in his consciousness and in his soul absolute exclusivity, he will most likely never realize that 100 years after him, just as 100 years before him, people will live, die, think, feel, love, and hate, each in their own form and in their own way, in accordance with the spirit of the time and the era. This is a closed ouroboros from which there is no exit. In this world you must pass through physical and metaphysical cycles in all possible forms, therefore, being human precisely at this moment, you must enjoy the possibilities and facets of this form. Perhaps tomorrow you will be a stone or a flower, a distant star or a tiny atom. Your life will be no less full than it is now, but that fullness will manifest itself in somewhat different variations. Ones that human consciousness can never comprehend, for it is incapable of fully grasping the metaphysical life and nature of a stone, a flower, or a bee. Even when you imagine yourself a bee and trace its entire physical life cycle from beginning to end, you will never know what it experiences and feels, what it thinks about and what guides it, its metaphysical essence. So who will this person be? Perhaps one who doubts everything, and therefore one who hears voices everywhere, even where there are none. Will he behold this world? Will he learn to see within it? Will he become a pawn or a king? Yes, even a pawn in this world, just like a king, must become such, for both the beginning of life and its end are a tabula rasa. Whoever he becomes, in these moments, in this second, when I cut his umbilical cord and separate him from everything prior, granting him the future, there is nothing I wish for so much as that he embody the divine purpose in this form, be himself, feel and think in his own way, regret nothing and never, performing great deeds and silently surrendering to inaction.